The young woman stood on a metro platform, staring straight at a camera. She didn't move. She just kept staring. Jose, a security guard, noticed her and felt that something was wrong. But when he stepped out of his booth to check on her, she was gone. He knew he had to call the police right away. The police arrived shortly after Jose's call, but when he showed them the video, they said there was nothing they could do. Not yet, at least. The woman didn't seem to be in any danger, and she wasn't even at the station anymore. But Jose felt that something very strange was happening. The rest of the day, Jose felt anxious, and the worst part was that he had to work a double shift. Normally, he would go home around 6:00 p.m., but today he was also on the evening shift. This wouldn't have bothered him if he hadn't seen the woman earlier. As the sun set, the station became eerily quiet. Just when Jose's nerves began to calm, he spotted a familiar figure walking on the platform. He recognized her right away, but something was different, sending chills down his spine. A metro station's a place where many things happen at once. People get on and off the metro, they wait, or they go home. You could get robbed, or you could find love. But what happened today at the metro station in Brooklyn shocked everyone who had ever traveled through there. It started off as a typical day. Jose arrived at the station in the early morning hours and began his shift as a security guard. He watched as the station filled with people going to work. This was one of his most stressful hours, as he had to be very focused to spot any suspicious behavior among all those people. Luckily for Jose, nothing out of the ordinary happened during rush hour, so he leaned back in his chair and ate a little snack. Normally, he could sit back and relax after that, but today was different. Little did Jose know, today was a day he would remember for the rest of his life. Hours ticked by, and Jose got on with his work. The day seemed like any other day, so Jose had no reason to be worried. He received a call on his phone and answered without hesitation. "Hi," he said happily, and he walked out of the booth for some fresh air. Jose returned to his booth only 5 minutes later, but a lot can happen in just 5 minutes. He looked at the screen, expecting to see a deserted metro station with only 2 or 3 people minding their own business, but he saw something different. It wasn't out of the ordinary to see women in the metro station. They traveled through there just as much as men, but there was something about this woman. Jose looked at her, and the woman looked at him. It felt like she was looking straight at him, but through the camera. He stared at the woman for a few minutes, and during those minutes, she stared back the whole time, never breaking eye contact. She couldn't see him. He was a few feet away in a blacked-out booth. So why did it feel like she was looking straight at him? Suddenly, Jose was jolted from his stare down with the woman when a metro arrived. A few people stepped out of the metro, and only 1 or 2 got on. Jose watched as the metro left again and figured the woman would be gone, but she wasn't. She was still in the same spot, staring at the camera with a strange look on her face. By now, Jose was getting a bit freaked out. This woman gave him the creeps, and he wondered why she was staring so intensely at the camera the whole time. Could there be something serious going on? Maybe she was having a stroke. Jose got up and stepped out of the booth. He looked around, but to his surprise, the woman was gone. How was this possible? He returned to his booth and looked at the footage again, and yes, the woman was really gone. But Jose wasn't one to let go easily. He had to see which way she had gone. As if the woman knew Jose was about to step out, she quickly ran away. She didn't take the metro, and when Jose rewound the footage even more, he noticed she hadn't arrived with a metro. After she walked up the platform, she stared directly into the camera for a few minutes and then left again. Jose couldn't shake the feeling that something could be wrong, so he decided to call the police. Maybe they had more information about the woman. She could be a fugitive or a criminal, so they might recognize her from somewhere. But when the police arrived, they had some disappointing news for Jose. The police looked at the footage and agreed that it was rather strange, but the woman had done nothing wrong, and she didn't seem to be in immediate danger, so there was nothing they could do. Jose was very disappointed but understood that the police couldn't solve this case. As he was told before, Jose was no quitter. He had his sights set on the woman and couldn't stop thinking about her. So he posted a message in a WhatsApp group he shared with his colleagues, and to his surprise, one of his colleagues contacted him in private with a chilling message. Apparently, Jose's colleague Glenn had seen the woman before. She had come to the station where he worked last year and did the exact same thing. Glenn seemed very frightened. Jose couldn't see or hear him, but he felt the fear through his messages. This woman really did a number on his colleague, and Jose would never forget what Glenn said last. "This woman is bad news. I never went back to that station after that horrible day." She had apparently frightened Glenn so much that he asked to be transferred to another station that same day, but when Jose asked Glenn to tell him more, he went silent. Glenn stopped replying to Jose's messages and even ignored his calls. The rest of the day, Jose was on edge, and the worst part was that he had to work a double shift. He would usually go home around 6:00 p.m., but today he worked the evening shift as well. This wouldn't have been a problem for Jose had he never seen the woman, but now Jose felt frightened, and he wouldn't be going home anytime soon. As the sun set, the station became eerily quiet. Just as Jose's nerves began to settle, he spotted a familiar figure on the platform. He recognized her shoulder-length dark hair, leather jacket, and light-colored jeans. This time, she turned and looked straight at the camera, but her serious expression had changed to a slight smile, sending chills down his spine. Joe quickly locked the door of his booth and called 911, hoping the police could intervene this time. He stayed inside, studying her posture and demeanor, noting she had no visible weapon. After 30 tense minutes of waiting, he noticed her making signs, but he couldn't understand what she meant. Suddenly, her smile vanished, and her serious look returned as she began walking toward his booth. Joe rushed to lock the door, relieved to find it already secured. He watched her approach, knowing she would reach his door any moment now. Joe waited, never losing sight of the woman. When she was almost at his booth, he turned away from the screen to face the door and waited for her to knock. But to Joe's surprise, the knock never came. His tense body loosened up, and he turned back to the screen, expecting to see the woman walking past his booth. But to Joe's horror, she wasn't walking past his booth. She wasn't even walking anymore. She now stood right in front of his door, but to make it even more intense, she stared straight into the camera again. This was a different camera than before, located directly above the door. It was as if she knew Joe was watching her, and as if she wanted him to watch her. But why was she so desperate to be seen? Joe faced a tough choice: open the door to confront the woman or stay in his booth and call the police again. Since the police had been unhelpful before, he decided he was on his own. There was an intercom he could use to ask her what was going on without leaving his booth, even though using it for personal matters was against the rules. He approached the intercom, cleared his throat, and hesitated, unsure whether to be direct or kind. Ultimately, he chose a friendly approach. Pressing the button, a high-pitched beep echoed through the nearly empty station, causing the woman to stop and look up, confused. After a tense silence, Joe gathered his courage and spoke. "Madam," he said firmly, "what are you doing in this metro station? Why are you standing in front of this door, staring into the camera?" Joe could see the exact moment the woman realized he was speaking to her. She looked back into the camera, but not with an angry look on her face as Joe had expected. Instead, she seemed very confused. Her scary demeanor had disappeared entirely. But when she was just about to answer, something happened that no one saw coming. The woman opened her mouth to answer Joe's question when she was forcefully interrupted. Two police officers jumped her from behind and pinned her to the ground. Joe jumped at the sudden ambush and immediately ran outside. Suddenly, he didn't feel frightened of the woman anymore. He wanted to help her. Joe rushed in and shouted for the officers to stop. They pulled the woman to her feet and handcuffed her, tears streaming down her face. Seeing her fear, Joe asked to speak with her, and the officers reluctantly agreed. "What's happening?" she asked, scared. Joe explained that her strange behavior had worried him enough to call the police. Suddenly, she burst into laughter, leaving Joe confused. Once she calmed down, she smiled and assured him she meant no harm. She admitted she had been too nervous to approach him and only wanted to ask him out. They laughed at the misunderstanding, agreed to a date, and eventually fell in love, cherishing their unique story.